Greetings, fellow humans. Welcome to the discussion table. My name is Sean on the Milwaukee, Wisconsin side of the table. On the Columbus, Ohio side, we have Alex Dollenmayer. Alex, who are we and what are we talking about today?
We are an indie pop rock band called Oh Geeez Not Again, and we're here today to talk about Alessia Cara's new album, Love and Hyperbole.
You know, it's been a while since we've done one of these, and back in September when we talked about the last record on this series, which was Marianas Trench's Haven, I really had no idea what we were going to do next. There was nothing coming on the horizon that really seemed like it would be up our alley. And if you had told me then that the next record we would be talking about would be Alessia Cara's new album, I shamefully would have probably said, Alessia Cara? She's still making music?
Same here.
Because I have not thought about Alessia Cara in quite some time. But you brought this record to me, and you said you had stumbled upon it out of the blue, and it was already the front runner for your album of 2025. So how did that happen?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. I mean, I was obviously in a similar position as you where I hadn't ever really thought about Alessia Cara. I knew of her hits from like 2015. I know she had that song with Zed too. That was pretty big. I never really delved into her discography in any way. But I was just on TikTok and I saw an ad for the song Slow Motion off this album. And immediately I was like, oh, wow, like this sounds really good. I want to hear the rest of it. So I think I saw that and I didn't even remember, I didn't go straight to Spotify or anything. And then I saw somebody reviewed it on YouTube. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that I like that song so much. So I should check out the whole thing. And I mentioned to you right after I heard it, obviously we'll get into this, but like you said, it's currently my favorite album of the year so far. And I think it will be a difficult task for it to be dethroned. It's very similar to how I felt about Billie Eilish with Hit Me Hard and Soft, just in how much it struck me on the first listen. I think it maybe even subconsciously something I was looking for. And then now that it's here, I'm like, yeah, I needed this. Yeah, that's my whole story of how we're here today.
That's interesting that you describe it as like something that you almost didn't know that you were looking for until you heard it. You know, I want to go back to what you were saying about how you kind of vaguely remember Alessia Cara. You knew that she had some hits back in the day. You know, listening to this record and kind of thinking back to my first hearing about Alessia Cara, I first really started paying attention to pop music in about 2015. And that was the year that Alessia Cara had her big breakthrough. And she was a star during a fascinating period of time in pop music to look back on, which was kind of this anti-pop era where everyone was trying to be the next Lord. We were, you know, it was very minimalist. It was very minor key. The music was about being the outcast and about disavowing the trappings of pop music in its traditional sense. And, you know, there were a lot of artists who came around that have been referred to as Lord-alikes nowadays. And of those Lord-alikes, the one that I always had a soft spot for was Alessia Cara. And I think that it's because she approached her music with a level of believability. Like she really did feel like the girl next door turned anti-pop star. And when she sang about being the outcast or about, you know, body issues or things of that nature, it really felt like it came from a believable place. And she was a person that I really wanted to root for. And I remember in 2018 when her music wasn't hitting on the charts the way it used to, that was kind of unfortunate to me. I was like, I always felt like she was going to be an artist that one day was going to make something that really resonated with me. So when you said that this album really surprised you and had become this favorite for you, I was eager to see what had happened in the 6 or 7 years that it's been since we've heard from Alessia Cara. So I came into it with that mindset. And to get into this record, you had heard Slow Motion. What other, if any, kind of expectations did you come in with?
Honestly, beyond that, kind of nothing. And that's so rare for me. It's hard for me to remember what it's like to get excited about an album without so much information already being like spoon-fed to you.
Sure.
I think I had only heard even 30 seconds of Slow Motion. I didn't even hear the whole song, and then I just started the album. And so I think that added to the surprise factor to me. I just couldn't believe certain decisions that were made that we'll get into, especially from a production standpoint. This album goes in a lot of different directions, or at least hyperfixates on different subgenres, more unique things, I think, within that. But yeah, I think it really helped me to go in pretty much blind. That never happens. And literally the only other time I can remember that being the case was Billie Eilish with Hit Me Hard and Soft.
Sure.
There was there were no singles for that. So maybe that's just the way I need to approach things, like just stay away from, because I also didn't know any sort of discourse about that. And that's a huge factor too. And I love that I didn't have to deal with any of that. Like I didn't have to worry about what people's expectations were or whatever else, because as much as I'd like to say that doesn't affect me, it definitely does when going into an album with preconceived notions. So I think it's taught me how much I want to go into future things this way, like maybe not hearing any singles, that kind of thing.
So we hit play on the first track here on this record that we had, no expectations for, and the first track is Go Outside. Is it worse or is it me? So you hit play on this track, you hear this first song. What did you think?
I don't think I've been so excited by an intro track to an album in like 5 years or something.
Wow.
I love this song. I love everything about this song. I would maybe say it's my favorite on the album. I mean, if not my favorite, then it's pretty high up there. But to me, it immediately set the tone for... It reminded me of that like 30-second snippet I heard of Slow Motion, just in terms of production, because something obviously big for me personally is the use of live drums. And not just the fact that there's live drums, but it's pretty raw, the actual recording. I don't want to get like too technical, but even like in this song, there's all these little like rim shots on the snare that give it this unique sound. It doesn't sound like anything's really overlaid with many samples. I assume there is for some kick and tom stuff, but that alone is super exciting to me. I think that is coming back a little bit, and that sound for drums specifically, the drum sound is very similar to like Silk Sonic, the Anderson .Paak and Bruno Mars stuff. It's there's a very like dead snare sound in a lot of cases. But yeah, just this song, it's got these stacked harmonies. It's got this fun hi-hat part. I love some of the lines here too. But a big thing that I'm going to come back to overall with this album is what it reminds me of most is early 2000s sort of adult contemporary, a little bit like songs about Jane, Maroon 5. There's a little like Sarah Bareilles in there. Obviously, it's not piano driven in that way, but again, just from a production standpoint, where I'm like, oh, this is the thing that I wanted. Like this is like, I've been waiting for someone to make an album like this. I will literally like every couple months Google, and I always get little to no results, albums similar to, I think it's Little Voice by Sarah Bareilles or Songs About Jane, something like that, because I'm so desperate for that. And this is obviously not a 1-to-1 ratio to that, but the feeling I get when listening to it is very, very similar to that stuff from like all the way 2001 to like 2007.
Interesting. That's a fascinating connection. There's a lot that you said there that I want to expand on here. So when I first heard this, I have to admit I was a little surprised by how kind of straight ahead R&B it was. And I shouldn't have been surprised by that, because Alessia Cara has always leaned towards R&B. You know, Here, her first single, was very R&B. So I think it took me a little bit to get acclimated to that. But once I did, this one also struck me as a really good song. I think it's got one of the strongest hooks on the record, that little, when I can't even go outside. That's a great little earworm of a hook. The thing that really put it over for me was that adorable synth solo, the Bill Wirtz synth. I love that synth sound. But, you know, you talk about the early 2000s of this, and that is actually gets into something that I want to kind of focus on in my understanding and unpacking of this record, which is the people who made the album. Because we haven't really ever had to talk about that on an album that we've discussed. Like with Billie Eilish, like all of those songs were written by Billy and Phineas. But on this record, there are a lot of different people who worked on this, but the main one that kind of is the through line for this was producer Mike Elizondo. And he produced Maroon 5's second record.
Wow, I completely forgot about that.
So I think that is, and that's maybe a hint as to what you're hearing here of that early 2000s nature. To tie into another record we talked about, Mike Elizondo also produced Good Day and Mulberry Street on Scaled and Icy.
The greatest songs on that album.
Which there you go. So I think I'm seeing another connection here as to why you might be into this.
Okay, sounds like he's my guy, you know?
He might be your guy. Mike Elizondo might be your guy. Other than that, I definitely, on the very first listen, I picked up on those drums. I was like, I can see why Alex likes this. The drums sound phenomenal. They sound great. They're so live, like you said. You can really tell this was a live kit, a live recording. There's some melody parts in this, so me being the songwriter and kind of the melody writer of our band, there's parts in this that I really like. I've already talked about the, you know, Can't Even Go Outside intro. The way that she phrases lonely in LA, I really love that too. Lonely in LA. I like that part a lot. There's a great line in the bridge, a moth to the flame as I am to shame. I love the phrasing on that. That really rolls off the tongue. My connection to this, though, was not the early 2000s, but to me, I was like, this very much feels like kind of a 2020, 2021 kind of song. You know, a kind of a COVID lockdown song, if you will. You know, feeling, you know, really lost and everything's falling apart and you can't even go outside. Like, come on, that's very, very 2020. And it's got that kind of bedroom pop feel to it, too, that I really like. To me, I'm like, man, I wish this had come around like 4 or 5 years ago. I think this could have been a big hit if it had been around 4 or 5 years ago. But very promising start to the record. I was very, very much a fan of this song and this style. And I would also agree that I think this is, if not my favorite song on the record, definitely in the top 3.
The funny thing about what you mentioned about it very much feeling like a COVID song, I was watching some interviews because I went back after this and listened to her 2021 album In the Meantime, where she wrote all of that and made all of that obviously in lockdown.
Sure.
And it's funny that that record doesn't sound like that at all or touch on that at all. And so it's kind of funny to me that, yeah, I'd expect this song, not from a production standpoint, but lyrically to be like the intro on a 2021 album.
Yeah, very much, very much.
But yeah, I do love the line, how can I come back to the earth when I can't go outside?
Right, yeah.
Now that I've gone back a little bit and listened to that previous album, something she seems to write about pretty often is just sort of feeling kind of like lost and doesn't really know what, you know, direction she should be going in, especially after such immense success in such a short amount of time. Like that has to mess with your head.
Oh yeah. And I mean, she was like, you know, 19, 20 when that happened. Yeah. So very young. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I really appreciate that because like you said, even when you go back to those early 2015 singles, it always felt, as you mentioned, a little more genuine than the stuff that's like kind of written with the intention of like just trying to relate to people of like, oh, aren't we all like sad and whatever, you know, especially when Stressed Out by 21 Pilots became such a hit. That was just like the thing to do.
Another Mike Elizondo production.
Wow. I love your facts. In short, love this song. As far as the one I come back to most, this is probably the one. Yeah. And when I've been pitching it to other people to listen to, this is always one that I pick out.
All right, we're off to a great start with this. We're agreeing with favorites already. It's like we're
It's like we're in a band or something.
Yeah, whoever would have thought?
But hey, who knows? This could get divisive. Who knows?
It could get divisive. So we've opened up the record. It's sounding great. We get to the second track, which is Left Alone.
Some things are better left alone.
Thoughts on Left Alone?
Yeah, so I mean, after the like high that I got from Go Outside, I was like locked in, and to be honest, I think I didn't really care what happened next because I was so like enamored by it. And I think this song actually helps me like take a little break in a way. I wouldn't pick it out necessarily as one of my top favorites, but this is something I'm going to continue to come back to. But the production on this album, and especially the mixing, is so tight. The bass, especially on this song and so many others, is so locked into the drums as well. Like, I don't know exactly who all the musicians were that performed these songs on the album, but it sounds like people in a room just jamming. And that is so unique to me because it's still very modern. Like, everything very clearly is still quantized, locked to the grid. There's a lot of like modern vocal processing, all that kind of stuff. So it's not like it's, you know, ripped straight out of, like I was referencing, the early 2000s or the 90s or something. But I do think that it works really well, like by being that polished. And this was really the one where the drum sound and that Silk Sonic, the way that that kind of sound for drums is achieved is just by placing towels on like the snare and the toms. So it's just super dead. And I've learned to like love that sound. There's a couple lines too that I think are really smart. I think as a songwriter, now that I've gone back a little bit, how much she's grown with this album is like insane to me, to be honest. I know there's a line in verse 2 where she just says, "There's a space where your brain should be." And that's just such a fun way to me of phrasing that rather than just being like, "You're dumb."
Right, yeah.
Because that would be my first instinct. But separately, last thing on this that I wanted to say before I hear your thoughts. Obvious thing that kind of goes without being said, but her voice to me is like perfect, just super smooth, and I think really pairs with this R&B style stuff really well.
I'm glad you brought that up because I think that you had kind of brought up not necessarily sonic parallels to Hit Me Hard and Soft by Billie Eilish, but just kind of in how that this affected you. And I think that one of the big similarities between these two records is they are produced to show off the artist's vocal ability, like above all else. And I'll say this, like, listen to this record, like there are certainly moments where she kind of shows off her vocal ability, but overall, like, it's just produced in a way to make her sound perfect. The vocal arrangements throughout are just so tight and well defined. It's a real underlying aspect of this record. And that was definitely something that really caught me off guard too, is that I always enjoyed her singing. I always thought she was a good singer, but this one, it really just feels like a different level. And I think that has a lot to do with just how well arranged and produced her vocals are on the record. So for me, with this one, something that I've noticed and came to the conclusion to listening to this record and also listening back through Alessia Cara's discography, even going back all the way to 2015, is that there is a very high floor to her music. She's a great singer. The production is usually very tasteful. The songs typically have a pretty good hook to them. With rare exception, I would say all of her songs are at least good. So the question doesn't become, what songs are good and what songs are bad. The question becomes, what songs are memorable? Which ones stick with me? And that's kind of the thing that I started really looking for as these songs went on in this record is, all right, what is going to stick with me from each of these songs? And I swear I've heard this song 4 or 5 times now, and I cannot remember how it goes. It just doesn't stick with me. It's a good song. She sounds great. Production is tasteful. It has a certain hook to it, but I can't pick this one out from the rest of the record. The one line that I like is she says, you pulled on my heartstrings, now you just get on my nerves. I like that line. Beyond that, I struggled to find the thing that makes this one memorable to me. So I would say, again, it's a good song. Is it one of my favorites on the record, though? Not quite.
I think it's an interesting point because I feel that way about maybe 1 or 2 other songs on this album, just in terms of memorability. And it's funny, as you're saying this, I'm racking my brain right now trying to think of at least like the chorus melody of the song, and I can't.
I remember the "Some things are better left alone." Like I remember that, but that's about it. Yeah.
Right now, the hook of like "Go Outside" is still stuck in my head.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
And so yeah, that totally makes sense. And I think that something I tend to feel with just albums I love is that, as I said, after "Go Outside," it's like it's kind of like my mind is already made up, and maybe that's fair, maybe it's unfair, but I can sort of let certain songs just sort of be enjoyable without like every single thing standing out to me. Even in some of like my favorite albums ever, like something I always reference is "Wake Up Sunshine" by All Time Low. I remember even on the first couple listens of that, there were definitely songs there where I'm like, that does not have the same level of, when I would get into tracks 8, 9, 10 or something, I was like, yeah, it just doesn't reach those same heights. But I think that when I look at these things as a whole, as long as I don't feel like I want this song gone or I feel like it serves no purpose or something, then I feel okay about it. So again, not necessarily one I would highlight either. I was a little surprised just by looking at fan reactions online that this one was always in the top for people. But yeah, for me, I'm feeling somewhat similar.
Now, I will say, so you mentioned about kind of how these all kind of serve the larger whole of the album. And there is a larger whole to be found here. Like there is maybe not necessarily a narrative to this record, but there's a front half and a back half, certainly. Like we're in the heartbreak section of the record. This first half of the album is all about heartbreak in different forms, and the back half is more about love in different forms. So, I mean, I can certainly acknowledge this has a place on the record. Like it's really the only kind of like real breakup kind of song on the record, like where she's saying like, we're like, I don't want this, I'm moving on from this, kind of on the record. So I can certainly see its place there. But one song that definitely stuck out to me and was memorable to me was track 3, and that was the first single, "Dead Man."
If you're really there, then why can't I walk right through?
What are your thoughts on this single from the record, "Dead Man"?
Yeah, I mean, it's so obvious to me with this being track 3. Like, you wouldn't even have to know that it was a single to know that it's a single, As soon as it opens with the bass, which I just think is really cool, like they get some low frequencies in there. Like when I play this in my car, I'm like, dang. To me, this song this should be a hit. I know that maybe it's like in the wrong time or something, but the closest comparison I could come to is like, I could hear this in the end credits of a James Bond movie.
Yeah, there's definitely like a spy / kind of mafia element to this song.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I'm just a sucker for horns. Like literally any throw horns on a song and I'll probably love it. And I think this song has so clearly so much confidence. I love that pre-chorus, "Thank your lucky stars, I'm creative." I think that's really fun. There's this post-chorus melody that I think only starts after the second chorus, the da-da-da with the horns. I'm like, dang, that is so good. Then they go into that whole, I'm drawing some interesting comparisons, but Panic at the Disco, Death of a Bachelor, tried to have these like jazzy moments, like on a song like Crazy Equals Genius and all these, and even Death of a Bachelor to a certain extent. This to me feels like a much more genuine version of that. I don't dislike those Panic at the Disco songs, but when it goes into the break, where they're just jamming with the horns and the drums, I'm like, yeah, let's just do it. Like there's multiple sections on this album where they're just jamming for like a minute. And I think that's so cool to have this, pretty long record, 14 tracks and allotting time just for instrumentals to really breathe. So yeah, I love the song. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are.
I mean, that horn part is legit. Like it's an incredibly cool arrangement, and it really just kind of comes out of nowhere. And you don't really get that again on the record either. And I think that really makes this one stand out. That's definitely my favorite part of the song is just that horn arrangement and how over the top it gets by that big breakdown. I kind of wish the chorus had a little bit more catchiness to it. It's a perfectly serviceable chorus and it gets the job done. I think that if it had a little bit more to it, it really could have tipped into that this could be a hit territory for me. Some little parts that I like about this, there are these little vocals that she throws in on the second verse. What do they say? Like, don't change, too late. Like they just kind of, these little exclamations that throw in there. Again, the vocal arrangements here are just, they leave no room to breathe. And I love that. Every piece of the song is filled in a certain way with these vocal arrangements. I would say this is definitely in the upper half of the record for me.
So that takes us to Subside. And I want you to start with this because I'm going to go on probably a whole tangent.
Okay.
And so I'm curious. I'm very curious about your thoughts.
It's what they say. Time's just
Okay, so this one is another one where, or probably the biggest one where I was like, okay, this is a Billie Eilish kind of song.
Yeah.
This is a very hit me hard and soft kind of song where, and would I have noticed that right off the bat if you hadn't like said that this reminded you of that record? Maybe not. But this, with the string arrangement, I mean, that's what makes this one stand out is the string arrangement to me. There's a really gorgeous string arrangement. And the way that the vocals are arranged, where there's like a lower part and a higher part, just in the way that they're packaged, it feels very much like Billie's acoustic ballads. There's a lot of great contrast to the melody, how you kind of start off with this kind of long, drawn-out part of the chorus where the, like, nothing good ever lasts, followed by the girl I was never came back. How that just goes up and down like that. That's a really good moment of contrast. I kind of wish that the intro had been the outro. That's one thing where, you hear her just kind of unadorned singing along, and she sounds great. She's just killing those riffs. I think that would have been a little bit more impactful maybe to me as an outro, but that's really the only note that I have on this one. It's a very solid, very pretty song.
One thing on that intro, it is kind of funny, like playing the album like in the car, for example, and Dead Man is like blaring, obviously, and then this starts so quiet.
Yeah.
And then, it, like you said, it just sounds like a demo recording or something of her just riffing. I personally really like it in the intro. And I will say, this is going to sound hyperbolic, but I tend to talk this way, and that's no pun intended.
And the album's called Love and Hyperbole, so you have more than enough room to talk hyperbolically here, yeah.
I will say, for me, this is like... oh gosh, this sounds so extreme. But... this is maybe like one of my favorite songs I've ever heard.
Wow.
Like in my life. I'm going to get into some more specifics, but like obviously Go Outside was a top song for me, but this was the song where even though I was already sold, I was like, oh, this is a special album just to me. And I think especially maybe it's timing, there's so many different factors in that. But for me, not only do I think, obviously her vocals are great, and there's so many incredible harmony arrangements and all these things. Like I literally don't think I would change a single thing about anything, but also the subject matter of this song, the lines that obviously stuck out to me the most, time's just pocket change that I'm wasting away, grieving what's still alive and fighting with an ache that won't subside.
Yeah.
I'm learning over time how little sometimes I will pay attention to lyrics. you'll even bring things to my attention where I'm like, oh, I didn't even know what this song was about. I just like the sound of it or something. And so when something really hits me personally, it just like takes it to a new level for me. I love when artists will write about just how finite our time is. And I am personally very drawn to any song that even will reference maybe feeling guilty for time slipping away, or even in grief feeling like guilty because you still have time and they didn't. Even if that's not what this song is necessarily trying to say, I can't deny that that's where my head goes. And I think it obviously helps that it's just a beautiful song. When I keep going back to this album, I'll usually run this back like a good 5 or 6 times because I'm like, oh, I need to hear this again. So yeah, I am very passionate about this song, and to me, this is the clear highlight of the album. So yeah.
Wow, I love to hear when something really strikes you like that. I think that's obviously what we always seek to do in our own music, is to write something that resonates with someone on a deeply personal level in a way that can be kind of hard to describe. I mean, when it's done right, I think that's how it ought to be. Like, that's what makes a truly special song, is just you hear it, it's just like, wow, this suits me in a way that's tough to fully describe sometimes. And so, yeah, I mean, and the lyrics are very good on this. There's that line about, who I was, she was made up. That's a fascinating little line too. And just the way that sits in the melody is really cool. So, yeah. Well, I don't want to say anything more about this because it's just, I don't want to ruin how special it is for you. I feel like we need to end on that. Like, that's such a great, it's such a great message. Like, absolutely. Wow. That means a lot. That means a lot that resonates with you like that. Well, I mean, can we say anything like that about track 5, Run Run?
I mean, I love the song. I am not emotionally overwhelmed by it or anything. But this is another one where if somebody asked me to pick certain songs out that I think help define this album, this is one that I would definitely center on, because I feel like a broken record, but I don't think maybe people realize how rare it is for drums to sound like this, or maybe it's a subconscious thing for people, but I can hear, like, in the recording how close the mic was to the hi-hat, and that you're not like touching it up. Like, this sounds like I could have recorded it in like my dad's basement or something, and that is so cool to me because it's not distracting in any way. Like, it doesn't sound like rough around the edges by any means, but it gives the song so much more groove. Like, some of the bass lines in this song in particular is insane, and then you have like a whole bass solo. I can't think of the last time I heard like the bass solo. Like, I'm like, get Joe Ludwig up in here.
get Joe up in here. Get Joe on the phone.
Yeah. I also think it's one of the catchiest choruses on the record. There's so many different like melodies that always get stuck in my head, even in the outro when you have all these stacked vocals, and the bridge. So yeah, I love the song. Nothing on the rest of this album competes with, something like Subside or even Go Outside for me, to be honest, but we get pretty close in places, and this is one for me that I was kind of glad to have this song, something so upbeat, after track 4.
Yeah, the groove is really the name of the game with this one, and especially in the bridge where she breaks it down with that run, 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 run from me, baby, run, run.
Yeah,
that's a cool little melody, and indeed that bass solo. That the first couple times I listened to this, I'm just listening to it on some crappy little earbuds, and then like when I first took the time to like really listen to it with the good headphones on, I was like, oh wow, there's a whole bass solo in this thing. This is ridiculous.
That's crazy.
You know, and that's the kind of thing that makes a song stand out to me. Is I can point to Dead Man and be like, oh, that's the one with the horns on it. Or I can point to Subside and like, oh, that's the one with that gorgeous string arrangement. This one, it's like, oh yeah, that's the one with the bass solo on it. So I'm always looking for those things like that really make something stand out to me. I wouldn't put this among my absolute favorites on the record, but it's certainly a fun one to listen to.
I wanna take the wheel of a car that I just stole. Let the rain funnel in from the window.
All right, now I'm actually want to start off with this next one, Drive, because this song gets to a part of Alessia Cara that I think came to kind of understand as I listened back to what she does. And something that I liked about a lot of her hits back in the mid 2010s is that, you listen to her debut record. And again, as we said, she was incredibly young when she made that record. And there are parts on it that feel, kind of generic in places, maybe even a little bit basic. But she could sell it. Again, to get back to, there was a believability to her when she was delivering those songs. And I think that comes into play on this record for me too, because there are certain songs on this record that are more simple than the other ones. And yet I found myself gravitating towards those songs. And this is one of them. Like, this is a pretty simple song in its construction, in its writing, in just the craft. And yet, this is easily one of my favorite songs on the record. I just love how this sounds. I love the way that those syncopated guitars just bounce off the really tight drum groove when that comes in on that first chorus. When she comes in with some of those harmonies, like those close harmonies in the back half of the song, absolutely beautiful sound. It's a simple arrangement, but it's just executed so well. The way that chorus was just the word drive, just like over a really legato line like that. I just love how this sounds. And it's kind of tough to say that there's one thing about it that stands out to me. There really isn't. Like I was just going on about how oh yeah, I love it when one thing stands out, so I can kind of identify the song by that one thing. This doesn't necessarily have that. And yet I absolutely love this. It's just the whole package for me. It's so tightly produced. It's simple, but it's so evocative. Like, that's the word I would use. It's evocative. And that helps that the lyrics are colorful too. Like, there's that line about, I want to crash like glass on the sidewalk. Love that line. This one really jumped out to me, and on repeated listens, this is one that I've come back to. I can hear this on a late summer evening, and it's a pretty picture. Mm-hmm. I really like this one.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with everything you said. I had a feeling when I was especially listening to this album in context of knowing that we were going to be doing this. I was like, Sean's going to pick this one.
Yeah.
I think it makes total sense because it's not one, like you said to me, that from a production standpoint or an instrumental perspective where I'm like, whoa, they did something crazy or something. It still has that live organic feel, but
very much.
I think that the simplicity definitely, I think it's the closest maybe that this album gets to some of her older stuff. Yeah, I love some of the lines on here. I can't remember where it is in the song, but she says, I've outgrown the face I wear.
Oh, that's a great line. Yeah.
She says, I'm getting over relying on tomorrow to get somewhere. There's lines like that where I'm like, dang, she is a great songwriter.
Yeah.
And it's, I'm going to get to this, when we sort of wrap up, I'm sure, but it's just a bit of a shame to me, sort of like you mentioned, where it's I think a lot of people, if they heard Alessia Cara's name now, they're like, oh, is that the girl from at this point, 10 years ago? And she's, to me, very clearly, after going through the older stuff, operating at her best.
Yeah, 100%.
And I'm like, I just wish I could shout it from a rooftop or something, because that's what was so exciting about the Billie Eilish record for me, is because obviously that was gonna do well. I mean, she just is who she is. But the way I experienced that record was within a community of hundreds of people. And I'm like, dang, I wish I could sit like 500 people in a room and just be like, listen to this. I don't care if you know who she is or if you don't know. And this is one of those songs that to me is just undeniable.
It's sad, but it is also inspiring to, like, you know, she's clearly so developed as an artist at this point.
Yeah.
And, you know, despite the fact that, you know, yeah, she's probably not going to have another song on the Hot 100 or a hit in the way that she would have, you know, 8 or 9 years ago. And yet she's still on the label and she's still working with these great producers. And it's a showcase that, you know, it doesn't all have to be about that hit making era. Like you can have a career as an artist beyond just being, you know, a kind of a child wonderkind as a teenager. I think that there is something to be said for that, to, you know, stick around and see what an artist is going to do after their commercial peak, because you never know where they're going to go.
Yeah, and I think that to go off of that, like, I've seen some stuff that she's said about this record, but you can hear, no matter what, how creatively fulfilling this must have been. So like regardless of reception, or, you know, I think if she really was that concerned about making a hit or something, she wouldn't have like a 45-second bass solo, you know, or something, you know, something along the lines of that. So it's like, to me, she can have, as much as I want this to be known and I want it to be huge, honestly, it is also nice that she just can have such freedom to create clearly just what she wants to and operate at such a high level.
All right, we got one song to finish out kind of the heartbreak half of the record, which is track 7, and that is Get to You.
I can never seem to get to you.
Anything you want to highlight on Get to You?
Yeah, so to me, I think this, like you said, I think there's very distinctly two different halves of this record, and I think this makes a ton of sense just in terms of placement. I absolutely love the way that this song builds. A majority of it is this like subdued drum loop, and then they do have like those bigger drums come in. You, as soon as you hear like the little electric guitar strums, you just know that it's going to hit. And I like that it doesn't wait until the end to do that, because I feel like that's something that I would expect, even on a song that I love from Billie Eilish, The Greatest. It's like, obviously that builds into such a big ending. And this isn't, you know, this doesn't get nearly as grand as that, but I'm glad that there's like multiple payoffs. I just love some of her melodies. Like some of the choices that she makes vocally are really interesting to me. And for me, I could picture, similar to Drive actually, imagine this like in a movie, looking out the window. I remember when I was younger, like on car rides, I would look out a window and pretend I'm in a music video. Like this is that song to me. And I think it automatically has, again, that kind of like early 2000s thing. The guitar solo from, I would hope it's John Mayer.
No, that's the next one.
Oh, you're right. Oh yeah, and it's a long solo, isn't it? I actually see like Get to You in the next song as a nice like bridge. I really like this one. I don't think I would label it as one of my favorites. Like it's maybe one of those ones where like hook wise, I would maybe want a little bit more, but I also don't really have anything more to complain about.
Yeah, this one is pretty solidly like middle of the pack for me. I do really love those big guitar chords when they come in, and I do like that little scratch that kind of lets you know, like, oh, here it comes, we're about to like explode here. What you were saying about it feeling kind of cinematic to you, like you could see this in a movie, I can definitely see that. When it does go into those bigger moments, it kind of highlights just how much like distance there is that she's feeling between herself and this other person. So on a production level, I do like it. I think, like you said, I think the biggest thing for me would be I would love a little bit stronger of a chorus for this one. I think that's kind of what it's missing from me. But again, it sounds great, as does the majority of this record.
Anything else on this one for you?
No, nothing else on this one. I had a minimal notes on Get to You. I have a little bit more notes on the next one. So let's get to Isn't It Obvious?
Isn't it obvious? Don't we got enough?
I would like you to start with this because I wonder if we'll disagree in some ways.
So this one had a bit of an uphill battle for me, honestly. I would say not actually much due to the way the song sounds. Like, the song sounds very nice. It's a very pleasant song, and she sounds great singing it. What caught me off guard was going through the credits on this one. Because this song, I'm not sure exactly how this worked, but this song is built around a fragment of a song from contemporary Christian artist Toby Mac.
Okay, interesting.
And when I saw that name, I was like, what on earth is this guy doing on an Alessia Cara record? And there are two songs on this record that when you look at the credits, when you look at that, you can tell that like this was a fragment or a song that was cast off from another project that she kind of repurposed it for this project. So with that in mind, did this song start off as like some kind of, religious love song? And you kind of maybe taints a bit of the lyrics for this one for me when you hear a line like, fear is a false creation. You're just like, oh, I feel like I see where that might have originated. Beyond that, it's a perfectly serviceable little love song. I don't find it all that memorable to me. The only thing that sticks out is the guitar solo, and I have to freely admit that I am no fan of John Mayer. Never have been. Just to kind of hear him noodle over this song for like 90 seconds, it's just like, all right, I really have no use for this. I would preferred a third chorus to end off this song instead of just listening to John Mayer and his very distinctive guitar tone just flow over this for an indeterminable amount of time. I'm a lot bigger a fan of the guitar work on Drive than I am on this guitar solo, if I'm being brutally honest with you.
Okay, so we don't feel that different. I still think that, to me, the sort of like segue from Get to You and Isn't It Obvious, it's just so, I can't think of another word. It's so obvious to me that this is like the middle of the album and the start of the back half. And I just always think that's nice from like someone who cares so much about like tracklist sequencing. I love that, it's time for me to flip the record over and then this starts. So I think my thing though is that I am absolutely shocked that this was a single. Like, this was the thing that was pushed hardest by the label. Like, I saw her perform it on, it was like Jimmy Kimmel or something like that. Jimmy Fallon, I can't keep track.
One of the Jimmys.
Yeah. I just don't love the hook. It's like, oh, that's it. Like, I have no problem listening to it, but it's not something where I'm like, oh yeah, isn't it obvious? Like, that's the biggest song on this album, which it is, like right now at least. Like, if I was her label, I would not have done that.
Well, I mean, I feel like they kind of have to push the name recognition where they can get it. And John Mayer is still a name that has a certain amount of like respectability to it, like especially in this kind of like a little bit underground, the mainstream where it's kind of R&B pop. Like, he's a big name in that space. And so I feel like that might have been why they went with this as like a single.
I think that makes sense. I'm glad that there's like nothing on this album to me that like sticks out like a sore thumb. Like, because even when you're saying that, it may have been written for another purpose or something like that, I'm glad that it still feels very much a part of this album, even from just like a production standpoint. Mm-hmm. So yeah, not too much to say on this. I like some of the instrumental choices, but there's nothing that like takes it over the edge for me. And I thought the guitar solo was cool, but not like, and it's like so obviously John Mayer.
That's one of the things I don't like about it. Like, not even that I don't like John Mayer. Like, even beyond that, it's just like this very much feels like a guitar solo that is about itself and not about complimenting the song. It's about like, look at me, I'm John Mayer on the song. Like, I don't care. Get out of here.
I'm honestly surprised he doesn't get like a like feature credit listed, because it's so like in your face with that. Also, something that's just interesting is just the fact that this song fades out. I don't hear many songs that do that these days. I used to have a strong disdain for that, but I've learned to get over myself a little bit. And we've done it a time.
Yeah,
or
we've
two,
done it. I was about to say it. We did it on our last album, so I'm glad that
Like
that you
on
got over
Mapmaker?
that. Yeah, yeah, it's on Mapmaker. Yeah.
Kind of, but like I would have been more opposed if the this is really we might not keep this in, but like because anybody who's watching for Alessia Cara doesn't care. But like I think the reason why that won me over is because the acoustic guitar keeps going.
Keeps going. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so like I remember when you first either mentioned or played that it was going to fade out, and I was like, oh no, we are not ending it this way. And then it was okay. Like I'm okay with it, and especially never mind, I won't.
So if any Alessia Cara fans are still watching at this point, go check out our record and tell me what you think of the fade out on the last track.
Yeah. Just go to
Just
go to
skip
track 14.
skip the whole record and go to track 14, the last 30 seconds, and just tell us what you think. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much it for this one.
Okay, so next we get to an interlude, the Garden Interlude.
Let the garden I had in the dry, but I might change.
Any thoughts on this one?
I have a big qualm with things that are labeled as interludes when I personally don't believe they should be.
Yeah. Well, I think. Well, I'll put my 2 cents in later. You've got the floor.
Okay, so another song that does this, I can't even think of the name of it. It's on the All Time Low, Wake Up Sunshine. What's that song called?
Oh, right. What is it? Pretty Venom or something like
Pretty
that?
Venom.
Yeah.
That is not an interlude. That's just a song. To me, I get why this was labeled that way, because it's easily the most like simplistic. So it's not like I don't understand at all, but I think it kind of undersells it, which is why I don't like tacking interlude on, because it's like, are you not confident in enough in it to like for it to actually seem like a song? And like even if you look at the stream counts on the album, you can tell that people skip over that because they're just like, oh, it's an interlude.
It's an interlude. Yeah.
And that's unfortunate to me because I don't know why. Like I love this song.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, there's something about the production that is kind of unlike anything on the rest of this album. It's definitely a little less organic feeling. But the like drum and percussion sounds that they do use are so nice to me, and everything is just so like silky smooth. Like there's even like more audible auto-tune on her voice that I actually really like.
Yeah.
Just from like a stylistic perspective. The way the harmonies are in the chorus, like panned left and right, I really like that. I'm a little surprised that I'm this drawn to it. I think it's just because it's so well produced. So that's why I feel that strongly about it as far as like it being an interlude, because I get it, but also I don't want people skipping it.
I'm not as hype on this one. I think this is, again, Is it bad? No, she's got a very high floor to her songs. I think it's a perfectly fine song. It definitely stands out a little bit to me because just of how synthetic it is.
Yeah.
In the context of the record, I think that it's nice to have this because it is a bit of a different sonic palette to what we're used to on the record. And when you're listening from front to back, it's nice to have a little moment like this where it's just like, oh, we're shaking it up a little bit. When I hear this just isolated, though, I'm like, this just kind of sounds like a demo. Like, it feels like there was more that was supposed to happen here that just didn't happen. There are parts of it I like. There are these keys that come in, like, right at the very end of the song that really have a lot of reverb on them. And I like that she kept the garden motif. That does come up a couple times on the record. It comes up in Left Alone. That's the first line of the song about how the guy like trampled the garden and like now she's back in the garden. I kind of like the progression there. Beyond that though, if I'm listening to the record full all the way through, I appreciate it. If I'm just kind of picking tracks, I'm like, I wouldn't be going back to this one myself personally.
See, it's funny you say that because like as you're talking about it, I'm like the chorus is like playing in my head right now.
Well, I mean, more power to you. More power to you.
I mean, yeah, totally. It sounds to me like a demo, but I'm just so glad that it's here. It's actually probably the most reminiscent of her last album, In the Meantime, which that album is so long. It's 18
tracks, yeah.
After going through her whole discography, that is so clearly my second favorite because I just think she's gotten better and better with time.
Yeah.
This isn't about that, but there are songs that I'm like obsessed with on that record. Yeah, to me, this is definitely something that could have probably been at home there, especially just in terms of like like you said, it's definitely more synthetic sounding. And it's funny how much I love the production elsewhere. Maybe it's kind of a nice change of pace for me, which is funny. But yeah, I'm a big fan.
All right. Well, I'm certainly glad it's working for you. Next up, we get Nighttime Thing. And I have some thoughts on this one.
Okay.
Now I'm picking petals from gardens. I think I like you like that.
I knew it. Drive in this one. I knew, and I
well, hold on now. Do you think I'm going to have positive thoughts on this one, though?
No.
You don't? Okay.
I do not.
No, again, not to say that it's a bad song. It's a good song. This one is very interesting to me, though, because this is the other one that you can tell was based off of a fragment from somebody else. This one being from Doja Cat.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure that this has been 100% confirmed, but it makes a lot of sense to me, and the right people were involved in the writing and production of this for this to be the case.
So it's, just to sort of chime in on that, it's actually sort of the opposite.
Really?
She wrote it for Doja Cat.
Really? Okay, interesting.
So yeah, it wasn't, so then it became a part of her record. So
okay. Regardless, I think there's one thing that is holding this song back. I appreciate that we are getting an up-tempo song. Like in the back half of this record, we get some up-tempo cuts after a pretty solidly slow to mid-tempo vibe for the first, 2/3 of the record, basically. So I do appreciate that we get a more up-tempo song. I wish they had gone more all out with this, because the thing that I love about a good, like, bubbly pop love song is when you go over the top with it. Like, I think about Doja Cat, and she always goes over the top. Like, even when she's got a really kind of rote pop song that she's working with, like a Say So or a Kiss Me More, there's always something that she throws in, or a way she delivers something that makes it stick with you and that makes it really stand out. Or the person that came to mind for me when I was listening to this the first time, which is Carly Rae Jepsen.
Oh, I knew you were going to say that. You took the words out of my mouth.
This feels very Carly Rae reminiscent.
Yeah.
Especially the song that really came to mind was she had a song that kind of briefly was going viral like a year or two back called The Loneliest Time. This sounds like it's going for the same vibe, but it's too tasteful. Like I want her to cut loose a little bit here. Like give me a little like spoken interlude like Carly did on Loneliest Time. Like what happened was we reached the moon. Like where is that in the song? Why is it only 2 minutes long? Like I wanted more here. So man, it's a good song, but I like my bubbly pop up tempos to be more colorful and more in your face. And I so wish that they had done that here.
That's so funny. I mean, it's funny because like the thing that you don't like is the thing that I like about it. Like I like that it gets to that line and doesn't cross it, because like I don't know if I ever told you this. I did like a real deep dive last year into Carly Rae Jepsen's stuff. So yeah, as soon as I heard this, I'm like, oh my gosh, like the comparison is like really undeniable. Probably not like a favorite for me, just because it does feel the most like, this doesn't sound like you wrote it to be a part of this thing. But I think the thing that sells it for me though is that it is still like tastefully produced within the confines of this album.
Sure.
And I think if she went off on some like spoken word thing or did some like thing really zany, I think it would have lost me a little bit, because it's especially coming after Garden Interlude, it's like it's already jarring to me. But I like the song. I think it's a fun little pop thing, and like I said, the production is what sells it for me. But it doesn't feel like Alessia Cara's voice. In some ways, like just as a songwriter. The one thing I will say that I do actually love is that it's rare for me to feel this way, but I think I like the verses on this song more than I do the choruses.
Yeah, I would 100% agree on that as well. Yeah.
And that's just fun for me. Even though I wish probably that the chorus could live up to that. I still am just glad that those verses really stick with me.
I will extend you a compromise here, because I do agree that like if she had gone off on some zany part on this, that it wouldn't have fit. What if she'd gotten someone else to go off on a zany tangent on this song?
Ooh, like a feature.
Yes, because that is another thing that I think this record is missing a little bit, is that I feel like there are moments on this record where I was just like, I could have used another voice here. And this one in particular, I was like, if she'd gotten someone else on this to be either like backing her up on this or playing the other person in the relationship, that could have put this over the top.
That sounds fun.
To go back to Doja Cat, like one of the reasons that I like Kiss Me More is that SZA's on it. And SZA offers this kind of alternative to what Doja Cat's doing, and it works. They work perfectly together. And I love that song because she's on it and she offers that kind of that extra personality. And I think that this song could have benefited from a feature of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, I could totally see that. I think it's cool that this record doesn't have any. I mean, unless you count John Mayer, because it does feel like her most personal. But with that said, like this song doesn't feel that way. So I definitely wouldn't be opposed to that. I'd be curious. I know it won't happen, but it would be cool to have like maybe a different version of the song with somebody else on it. But I enjoy it. I'm not surprised by what you think in a lot of ways.
Well, I'm glad that we understand where we're coming from here. Like I knew from when I first heard Go Outside, I was like, oh, he loves the drums on this. And like you knew when you first heard this, he's going to be like, oh, it's not fun enough. Like,
And even Drive, especially. I was just like, that's Sean's. Like, he can take that one. That does take us into Feels Right.
None of my business if you're vicious or the love of my life.
Which I want to sort of kick off because, the string from like Get to You to Nighttime thing, to me, that's like maybe the weakest link, as much as I like the little interlude. Feels Right is the start to me of the greatness of the end of this album, which is surprising because when I first heard this one, it was not one of my favorites. And I don't know if I would even still say that now, but it's easily the one that's grown on me most. For whatever reason, this and the next song feel the most like that sort of like early 2000s.
Okay, yeah.
It's not even necessarily like the sort of Maroon 5 thing. It's almost like I could hear Miley Cyrus do a song like this in like 2008 or something. I don't know. Some of these songs towards the end, and this is not specifically with Feels Right, but kind of in this last string, with the exception of Slow Motion, it really gives me the energy of like The Climb by Miley Cyrus.
It's an interesting connection. I was not one that was on my list.
It was like in my brain, and I'm like, what is that thing? And it's not from a like even a songwriting perspective or anything like that, but there's a feel that comes from these songs, and to me a little bit of Feels Right, where I feel like you could have technically plucked this out of like 2007. So to me, it is automatically given a bit of like a nostalgic boost. It's still not like a very memorable chorus. That's something that, could have been stronger, but I love a lot of different parts of this song though. And to me, it feels like the start of the end for this album in a good way.
Yeah, there are some lines in here that I like. She says in the chorus that, we can run it into the ground or the finish line. I like that image a lot. There's also kind of like a little jokey line that she's got about how like you, taxes, and dying are all inevitable. And that's another cute line. This is another one that I feel could have benefited from being a little less tasteful. Like she's throwing caution to the wind and being just like, well, I don't know if this is going to last forever, but like it's fun. So like why overthink it? So I feel like it could have had a little bit more urgency to it for me, or a little bit more spunk to it to make it really stick for me. It's a pleasant song. that kind of, like I said about Left Alone, I've heard it a bunch and I couldn't tell you what it sounds like.
Yeah, it's funny that like I also can't remember right now how this song goes, which is funny because I like it so much. With that said, I don't think it's one that I'm like, oh, I have to go back and listen to Feels Right. Yeah, I definitely can understand that a bit. So that takes us to Fire, which I know was originally supposed to be a single. But then for obvious reasons, timing-wise, with the LA fires, that didn't end up happening. So they swapped it for slow motion, which we'll get into. But
It's nothing, I'm jumping in head first and ooh.
yeah, if you want to kick this one off, what are your thoughts?
Well, I want to know, what did you think I was going to think of this one?
Ooh, a test this time. I would be shocked if you didn't really enjoy this one.
All right, good call, because this for a while was my favorite one on the record.
Let's go.
You know, again, to go back to what I said about Drive, I think that Alessia Cara can sell a simple song and add this believability and a certain depth to it that is really special to her. And I always appreciate it when an artist can take something simple and make it feel so much more lived in and personal than it would have in other hands. And this is another one where it's just like the production on this, the construction around this, it's so simple. Even some of the lyrics are just, I mean, ooh, I'm on fire is about as simple as it gets.
Right.
Bruce Springsteen did this decades ago, you know? Like, it doesn't get much more simple than this, and yet it just sounds so good. It is just this lushly produced, the way the melody just waterfalls over itself. I love melodies that do that, and she sells it to the rafters. It's so good. When it cuts out then for that high note on the last chorus, she's doing those riffs at the end. I'm just like, this is about as good as like pop R&B gets. Like, this is so good. There are some good lines in there. There's a line that really sticks with me. Golden boy in dirty jeans. I love a little contrasting image like that. Great line. I mean, there's not much I could say about this. It's just so perfectly done in such a concise way. It's a great song. It's definitely in the top 3 for me on the record.
Cool. I'm very glad to hear that because like I don't know if for me it's in my top 3. I mean, I just can't. I have trouble deciding on that list. But it's probably my favorite song outside of Subside vocally.
Yes,
she just
vocal
like
performance is incredible.
Yeah. It's nuts. Honestly, like it's one of those things that to me again is undeniable. Where you could play this for anybody, and it's like I don't care if you don't even like the song. If you hear her performance, it's like, yeah, it's just amazing. And the whole second half of the song, like, is one of my favorite spots on the whole album. Like the way this thing like crescendos, it's like, oh my gosh, like
that drum build on the bridge. That's really great. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this album at this time really needed this song because as much as positives as I can say about some of the previous stuff, this is like a real, and I feel that way about actually the rest of the songs, like a real standout. I think it's a perfect placement in the track list too. The one thing I was concerned about when I was trying to decide if you liked it or not is the sort of simplicity of Fire. And I was like, oh no, I hope he doesn't have a problem with that.
In any other hands, I probably would. Right. Like if you gave this to, someone that I don't consider to be as great a singer, I would be just like, well, what? I'm on fire, so what? But here it's just like, wow, I'm on fire,
Yeah. It's like you are. Like, I believe you. Yeah, same here. I mean, like, ooh, I'm on fire. To me, like, if you're not really selling that to me, you couldn't think of a single other way to say that. But it really works here.
I think this is actually being pushed as a single currently. And I think that's a great choice. I think that if there's any song on here that could kind of like just kind of creep its way into a playlist or onto the radio, I think it's this one. And I hope it does. I really do.
I think it could be like a little long for something like that, but I mean, they could always like condense that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hope it's that way too. Like, and even when I have the vinyl of the album sitting in front of me, and Dead Man isn't obvious, and Fire isn't obvious to me being like the outlier single wise. To me, it just makes perfect sense. And then that takes us to the song that started it all for me, technically, Slow Motion.
I see everything in slow motion.
Yeah, for me, I am very glad that this song, maybe it was going to be pushed as a single like after the record came out and it was just released like a couple weeks before, but I'm so glad that this happened to be the one that I heard on a TikTok ad. This is like the best the production gets to me. Like I've loved everything, but like this song has got a real groove to it. I maybe have a gripe with the fact that it's like the second to last song on the album. I may have put it a little earlier, honestly, because it's just such a single to me. But to me, it is literally like a perfectly crafted song. There's like this high note she does in the chorus that is like so addictive. I saw videos of her recording that. The other thing, obviously, for me, talk about from a mixing perspective, a perfect drum mix. The kick and snare absolutely snap on this thing with the bass, and so do the toms, like the way those are panned and they hit so hard. Like the drums are in the forefront of this mix. I know that Alessia Cara in interviews and stuff has said that this is like part 2 of Isn't It Obvious. I don't
hear that at all. Yeah, sorry.
I don't even really know what that means, and I don't really care because I love this song. I'm very glad that this was the one that roped me in. I think it makes perfect sense that this was the one, because even vocally, it's like perfect to showcase off her voice, but then also the production. So yeah, curious what you're thinking.
You know, I feel a little silly here because the song is great, and, you know, it's got this great bass line, great groove. She sounds great on it. You know, everything that you mentioned. And yet the part that I like the most about it, and that makes me kind of giggle every time, is on the chorus. You know, there's a great kind of call and response aspect to the chorus, as is Go Outside too. But there's a part where she says like, hear the angels sing, and then there's this little harmonized that comes in right after that. Hear the angels sing. It's just like, I love
That's
that.
such a-
It's like
that's such a-
the angels just swung in. They had like a millisecond to get their little note in there. They were just like, oh, we got to get down there.
Yeah.
Just like imagining that scenario, it just makes me chuckle. So that's the part of the song that sticks with me. Is hear the angels sing. Here we go.
There was only you would say that. Like I would
know.
never. You would never. When I'm going through, like, oh, I love the bass or I love the drum mix, and then you say that.
Well, I think
that's
that just shows off our unique personalities here. Like,
Yes,
when you want to
definitely.
impress Alex, like, you know, really dial in the drum mix.
Yeah, get your kick and snare popping.
When you want to impress me, throw in a little goofy interjection, and I'll be like, yes. It's just like the when we were talking about Lunch by Billie Eilish, which has bunch of these little parts in there, like she's the headlights, I'm the deer, and then the tire squeal like goes across your ears. It's like, I appreciate that, Phineas. You know.
Yeah.
All right, you want to wrap this thing up with the last song?
Oh yeah.
I feel the ocean between us closing.
This song, oh my God. Let me tell you, I love when an album closes on a song that could only be the closer. If you put this song anywhere else, it would be weird. Like, I honestly think I would be confused because I'm like, well, it's the end of the record. To me, this is actually the closest to the sort of Miley Cyrus, The Climb kind of thing to me. When I'm drawing these comparisons, again, it's like, I don't think maybe anybody else would say that, but it's all in the feel to me, where it's like, this could be, you know, an end credits song in a movie, which I love that kind of stuff. It's so detailed and layered. Like, even in the last 30 seconds, it's like a mostly instrumental outro, but then she has these like harmonies in the back. I love ending the album thematically on such a positive note. This is definitely in the top 5 for me, and I think it helps that it caps off an album that, you know, I know will be maybe the top album for me for this year. And I just love a good optimistic ending. I think my only gripe, sorry, this is about the drums. The drums are obviously very raw, as I've said for all the other songs. They're a little hot in the mix. When verse 1 starts, I'm like, you could have turned that, I'm getting so technical. You could have turned that snare down like 3 dB and I would be happy.
Exactly 3 dB. You hear that, folks?
Exactly. Let me get a remix.
With the snare down 3 dB. See, now I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but folks, if you're still watching us here, so you know when your favorite artists talk about how, like, you know, they turn in an album or they turn in a song and the label just gives them notes on it and they're just like, oh no, that's got to be louder. Oh, it doesn't have a single on it. Alex is that guy. Yes, he is the guy from the label who gives your favorite artists their notes. Not like in actual real life, but if he worked at a label, that would be his job. So this that you're hearing about, like, the snare needs to go down 3 dB, like that's the kind of note he would give your favorite artist, and they would go back to their producer just like, oh my gosh, the label just doesn't understand me.
Yeah, and I can't help it either. Like, I'm glad that this is the only spot on this album that I feel this way. In the grand scheme of things, that means absolutely nothing to me. Again, it's a top 5 song for me on the album, but it is something that will always, I mean, just by the nature of who I am, I don't think I can overlook. Yeah, it's a very small, it's like the nitpickiest thing in the world, but I love the song, and this would be another one where if you didn't like this one, I would be very upset. So that's all I have to say.
I do like it. I think the one thing that actually is kind of holding it back for me is looking at it holistically on the record. I'm a little bit unsure of what the story arc ends up being here. Like, you know, we've got our heartbreak half and we've got our kind of love struck half. And yet this is like a song about a relationship that didn't last. And, you know, we go from slow motion where she's saying, like, I heard you say it's me or it's no one. It's this big celebration of just like, you know, oh, we got it in the bag here. And now it's just like, oh, never mind, we didn't have it in the bag. And it's like, is that what she's saying? Like, is that the arc of this record? If so, I mean, I guess I can see it in the sense of, like, the first breakup was, you know, one that she took very hard, and like, but this one she could handle with like maturity, and she could see everything clearly, and she could still like appreciate and understand this person regardless of whether or not the relationship worked out. And like, it's a great sentiment. It just feels like we jump from one to the other, like really quick there. Like, if that is the arc of the record. I mean, again, it's certainly a good song. It's got a great arrangement to it. It's very triumphant feeling. I can definitely see the Climb comparison here more so than I could on Feels Right. But I guess for me, when I'm trying to like look at the record holistically, I'm kind of just like, how did we get from being so like, you know, oh, we got it to, oh no, it's just like, what happened here?
Yeah, I mean, that definitely makes sense to me. It's funny that like the way that I view this record, and I think most artists sort of write with this intention of maybe it not being so specific, but maybe you coming up with your own meaning, is like, to me, the things that she touches on in this album, and then also definitely the previous one, of just sort of feeling like lost and aimless, and like maybe like you're wasting time. To me, seeing clearly feels a bit more overarching to me than just like the relationship aspect. So that's at least what hit me personally. I think you're probably right that it's not written with that in mind, but from me listening to this whole thing, it was a nice note for the way I related to the record.
That is a nice perspective to have. I hadn't honestly thought of that. I didn't listen to too many interviews that she did about this record, but the ones that I did hear where she was kind of saying like, you know, yeah, I feel like earlier the music that I made was made at a time where I there was just a lot going on. I didn't understand myself, and like now I feel like coming out on the other side of that. And for this to be not the closing necessarily of this story, but of indeed her own personal journey up to this point in time. Yeah, I can certainly hear how that would be a very fitting closing and a triumphant moment to say, like, I can come to peace with everything that's happened before, and I can move forward while also appreciating everything that happened. Yeah, I can. Oh, that's a great way to read that. Yeah.
So, anything else on this one beyond that?
No, although I will say, like, I think it's cool that you've kind of gone back and kind of reevaluated your appreciation or your relationship with Alessia Cara as an artist because of this. And I think that is really what a great record ought to do, where you hear something that really just makes you go, wow, I never gave them enough credit. I never gave her enough credit as a performer, as an artist. And to have a record like that impacts you on that level, I think that's a special thing.
Yeah, I'm just so glad that this was the album that did it for me. I mean, I don't think it could have been any of her others. I will go on a bit of a tangent again, but that album, in the meantime, I just have to say, for anybody that's still stuck around, if you want to hear a great pop song, just know that I personally believe, I'm going to address the camera directly, that Lie to Me should have been a hit, okay? I feel so passionately about that song, and it just got swept under the rug, and it's a crime against humanity. It's a crime against the music industry. So that's what I'll say on that. But I mean, for the most part, when I'm going back through her back catalog, and it's not to dismiss it, but this album, it doesn't even compare. It's just to me, she's operating at such a higher level as a songwriter, and just in terms of production, obviously. I am so glad that I stumbled upon this. I feel like I may have found it in other ways this year, but the way that it happened and the way that I went in blindly really helped my experience. And again, there's some songs on here that I'm going to take with me and keep recommending to so many people. Yeah, love the album. Very glad to have heard it. And it's obviously nice to hear your perspective as well on it. I'm glad that you enjoyed it, even with like minor disagreements. This was the one that I think we knew the least about. I mean, you knew I loved it.
Right.
But like, I knew nothing about how you felt. So I was like, I get nervous before these things. I'm like, man, if I'm like talking it up and then you're just like, on every song, it would be a shame.
I wanted to close this with one thought, and this has just been something I've been thinking about as we're talking about Alessia Cara and going back to the days when she was a star. That anti-pop era, the era of the anti-pop star in 2016 through 2018. That had a lot to do, I think, not only with, Lorde ending the club boom with Royals, but also with there being this upheaval in culture, especially in American culture at that time. And I think about how, like, the artists that were big then, so many of them were big for, 1 or 2 of those years and just never again. Your Alessia Caras, your 21 Pilots, your Khalid, even bigger artists like Halsey and Shawn Mendes, they didn't really make it out of that era. I look to where we could be going now, and we're in a moment of real big cultural upheaval right now. And I think, will anyone look back on that era and go, well, those artists got us through that time. Maybe they'll get us through this one. Could any of those artists have a comeback? Like, did Alessia Cara happen to come back at a time when maybe, just maybe, someone could look back and go like, wow, the last time we were going through this, Alessia Cara was a star. Maybe we should bring her back. Just a thought that I've had.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, when I think of this record, and even I'm looking at it right in front of me, the album cover, I have a hard time not picturing the future as, I think maybe it'll take years, but I could see people looking back at this and realizing that there's like a bit of a hidden gem here.
Yeah.
And, I hope that's the case. Like we said, what's most important maybe isn't like that there's a ton of hits from this album, but it's that she's creating these things clearly on her own terms and doing it the best she ever has. But I don't know, at the level that it is, I find it hard to believe that it won't find its audience and its way. I don't know how immediate that will be. I just don't see it ever reaching the heights of like a Hit Me Hard and Soft, which is just the nature of where she's at in her career. But I really hope that time is kind to this album. I know that I'm going to keep listening to it over and over again. So yeah, like I said at the top of this, just to wrap it all up, it's very cathartic to me to have this album that I wasn't intentionally looking for it, but it's like, oh yeah, that's the thing. Like this is this is the one for this year that's gonna define the entire year for me. So yeah, it's just nice to see too, like when I'm recommending it to people, just sort of the immediacy of their response of like, oh wow, like everybody knows her name from all the previous stuff, but it's a different kind of surprise hearing this stuff. So yes, I'm very thankful for this record, and yeah, I'm glad we could talk about it.
Thanks for introducing it to me. Thanks for discussing it with me. Thank you all for listening to us talk about Love and Hyperbole by Alessia Cara. We will hope to see you back at the discussion table again soon. If you're still here, I must note that we are going on tour next month in April, and we would love to see you there. The tour dates are on your screen now. If you are in need of some pop rock music inspired by fantasy adventure coming-of-age stories, and honestly, who among us isn't in need of that music, we invite you to come out and see us live. We'd love to see you there. And until next time, peace.